back here on the GSMC Football Podcast. And for all right, and we are back here on the GSMC Football Podcast. And for the final
Keep yourself in the loop of everything football on the Golden State Media Concepts Football Podcast. The latest news on and off the field, be it college football, Big Ten, SEC, Big 12, Pac-12, ACC to the NFL. We've got you covered. Listen to the Golden State Media Concepts Football Podcast.
And welcome everybody to another edition of the GSMC Football Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. As always, I'm your host, Kenneth, and it's great to have you guys here on this Wednesday, January 8th. We have a lot to talk about on the show today. Before I get into that, just want to remind you guys, as always, tip or donate, get your comments recognized. Make sure to hit that super chat button in the chat if you want to see me acknowledge any thought or comment you may have throughout the live broadcast. Makes the show more lively, more entertaining between myself, the host, and you guys, the viewers. We appreciate you guys' viewership each and every day, so any contribution you can make to the show means the world to us as we put out content for you guys each and every day. And also, the other way to help out the show is by going to the link at the bottom of the show segment on the ticker, gsmcpodcast.net. That is gsmcpodcast.net. So let's get into what we are going to discuss for today. So I'm going to start off the show. The first two segments will be a couple of coaching topics. We'll talk about the latest in the coaching carousel as Doug Pederson and Antonio Pierce were both let go by their respective teams. Doug Pederson being let go by the Jaguars after 3 seasons, and Antonio Pierce being let go after 1 full season as the head coach of the Raiders. Took over for Josh McDaniels last season. So, yeah, this was his first full year, and he was gone after 1 year, which I'm not happy about, not just because I think he didn't deserve it. I mean, the Raiders were not good. So, yeah, I understand why the decision was made. But just as a Giant fan, seeing that, it is a little upsetting. But we'll get into that. We'll talk about, in the second part of the show, should the Cowboys bring back Mike McCarthy? Jerry Jones met with Mike McCarthy recently. And also, the Bears requested to interview him, and the Cowboys denied them. So, we'll talk about that. We'll also get into talking about the news that David Montgomery will return for the Lions divisional round matchup, whoever they end up playing. We'll see what happens this weekend, and that will determine who they play the following week. But I'll just talk about that, the impact of that. That's huge news for the Lions because it looked like he was going to be out for the season. And that's not the case. So we'll get into that. We'll talk about the Broncos and the Commanders both making the playoffs with rookie quarterbacks and, talk about if they both have chances to maybe make a little bit of a run here in the postseason. And then in the final part of the show, something that I haven't done in a while because we were off for a little bit, and that's power rankings. I'll give you my power rankings, my top 5 teams going into the playoffs now, and that will bring us to the end of the show. So let's get into the first topic, which is talking about Doug Pederson and Antonio Pierce being let go. So we'll start off with Doug Pederson. So the Jaguars, they brought him in. They hired him after a disastrous of a season with Urban Meyer the previous year in 2021. They brought him in for the 2022 season. And, yeah, that was a season that Jaguars fans want to forget, including this year. They want to forget about this year now. And, it looked like things were on the come up for Jacksonville. Because if you remember, they did get off to a slow start in 2022. And it looked like they weren't going to make the postseason. But then they made a run. And they ended up finishing the year 9-8. They beat the Titans final week of the regular season. Now, the Titans were starting Josh Dobbs in the AFC South Championship game because that was played on a Saturday night because Tannehill was hurt, I believe. So, yeah, Josh Dobbs had to start. And actually, the Titans had the lead at one point, but Jacksonville went ahead. There was a pick six late in the game. The Jaguars got the win. They made the playoffs. They won a playoff game. They beat the Chargers. They were down early, but they came back. Trevor Lawrence did not have a good performance, at least in the first half, but ultimately they overcame it. They won the game, and then they played a close game against the Chiefs. So you're like, okay, the future is bright for Jacksonville. But then last year comes around, and they start off the year 8-3, and after they beat the Texans in Houston, you thought, oh, yeah, this division is wrapped up. They're going to win this thing and make the playoffs. And then they just collapsed. Now, Trevor Lawrence got hurt, so that played a role in that, but that was not a good look. So going into this year, I thought, well, I didn't have the Jaguars making the playoffs, but I still had them finishing at 9-8 because that's kind of what they've been doing these last couple of years. And the wheels just completely fell off for the Jaguars. Trevor Lawrence again got hurt. Had that vicious hit by Alshire when they played the Texans. So he had a concussion, of course, and then just some other injuries as well. And, the defense was not good. And they started off the year 0-4. Then they were 1-5 at one point. Their first two wins of the year came against the Colts, and we saw, how the Colts finished this year. Their defense was not very good. They beat up on the Patriots in one of the international games. And then their only other wins after that came against the Titans. So they beat the Titans twice, you beat the Patriots, and you beat the Colts. That's it. So it's just not a good year for them. And it makes sense why this decision was made to let go of Doug Pederson. It's unfortunate, though, for Trevor Lawrence because now he's going to be going through another transition. There's going to be another head coach that comes in. And, we've seen other franchises go through this with a young quarterback. And that's something you don't want. And you kind of worry about that with Caleb Williams because now the Bears, they'll be making a change. They'll be hiring a new head coach. My team, the Giants, we've seen what they've done over the years, what they did to Daniel Jones. You don't want to see that with Trevor Lawrence, and that's kind of what's happening right now. So we'll see who they end up bringing in. Hopefully they make the right decision. I think they're one of those teams that they need to bring in a proven head coach to go with Trevor Lawrence. And there are some guys out there. I think Pete Carroll should be at the top of a lot of these teams' lists. Because he still wants to coach. And I think Pete Carroll would make an immediate impact on whatever team he ends up with. And I think Jacksonville could be a possible spot for him. I think he might have been linked to Jacksonville. One of the landing spots could be Jacksonville. Bring him in. Bring him in. So, yeah, that's the Jacksonville side of things. But now let's get into the Raiders. So they let go of Antonio Pierce after one season, one full year. And if you remember from last year, he took over for Josh McDaniels when they let him go midseason. And the Raiders actually played better with Antonio Pierce. And then after the year, or as the year was coming to a close, if you remember, Max Crosby and Davante Adams were advocating for him to be the head coach for this year. And what's funny is now Davante Adams is not even on the team. He ended up wanting out anyways. But Antonio Pierce did end up getting the job. And I thought, going into the year, obviously the quarterback position wasn't great. The options weren't great. They brought in Gardner Minshew. They had Aiden O'Connell. And, Minshew had a good year with the Colts last year. So I thought the Raiders were still going to be kind of a gutsy team. I thought the defense was going to be better. And they still had Devontae Adams at that point. So I thought, all right, let's see what happens. But, after they beat the Ravens, because you got to remember, they beat the Ravens in Baltimore. After that, the season just went on a tailspin. And like Jacksonville, I think they finished with 4 wins on the season? Yeah, they finished with 4 wins on the season as well as I apologize. See, this is what I was talking about yesterday. My camera acting up. But yeah, so both the Raiders and the Jaguars, they finished with 4 wins. Raiders started off the year, like I said, they started off 2-2, but then they ended up losing. They ended up going on a losing streak of, I think, 10 games. They lost 10 in a row. Then they won 2 straight. They beat the Jaguars, and then they beat the Saints, and then they ended up losing to the Chargers to close out the year. So they got a lot of work to do. They need to address the running back position. They need to bring in some more pass catchers as well to surround Brock Bowers, because Brock Bowers, he was kind of the lone bright spot for the Raiders. They need to surround him with more talent. Now, Jacoby Myers and Trey Tucker are nice players, but they need a number 1 receiver. Now, they had that in Devontae Adams, but he wanted out. So, we'll see what they end up doing in the draft, and we'll see who they end up bringing in. It's possible that maybe that could be another landing spot for Mike Vrabel, just because, Tom Brady, is a part-time owner there. But I think I would probably lean towards him going to the Pats. That's just my opinion. I think the way it seems, the Patriots, they saw how the meeting went with the Jets, and they're like, no, you're not taking him. We're going to bring him in, and he's going to be our next head coach. So you got to wonder, what are the Raiders' plans? Now, I know I said running back, some pass catchers. They also need a quarterback, too. Now, I think Aiden O'Connell is a good backup. Maybe he could be a bridge guy, but that's really it. He's kind of limited. So, we'll see. The Raiders have a lot of work to do. Both teams have a lot of work to do. So, we'll see who they both end up bringing in. Let me know what you guys think. Who do you think would be good candidates for these 2 teams? Let me know in the comments. So we are going to take our first break now. And then when we come back, we'll talk about the Cowboys. We'll talk about, should they bring back Mike McCarthy? So make sure to stick around, and we'll be right back here on the GSMC Football Podcast.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign.
I wanna be the greatest. Everybody on the fake shit. I look around and feel like everybody is the fakest. I make this every day and I'm impatient, hoping one day I blow up from the basement. Statement, the top is so vacant. I don't hear shit that I think is amazing. Waiting for my day when I'm playing sold out shows for 1,000 faces. Hey, give me that crown, get in my way and to be put down. It ain't your place, all this my town. If I want that shit, then I'll get it right now. I'm losing it, the noose it fits. I'm losing shit, a stupid myth. You choose to live or choose to dip. You choose to fight or lose your grip and lose a gift.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind?
All right, and we are back here on the GSMC Football Podcast. And for the second part of the show, we are going to now get into talking about should the Cowboys bring back Mike McCarthy? And it was being reported that the Bears were looking to maybe interview him, and I guess the Cowboys, they denied them. So, I don't know. It's interesting that happened because maybe that's an indication that they want to bring him back. Now, they're going to have to sign him to a new deal because he's on an expiring contract. So, should they bring back Mike McCarthy? And I think, I mean, I can't speak for Cowboy fans. I feel like there's definitely a group that maybe would want to bring him back, but I just feel like, for the most part, there might be, I think the majority of fans probably want to see the Cowboys go in a different direction, especially because of how this season went, how this season started off. Now, Mike McCarthy in, what was this now, his fifth season? Because his first year was 2020. Yeah, his fifth season. His record as the Cowboys head coach is 49-35, which is not bad. He had 3 12-5 seasons. His first year with the Cowboys, they went 6-10, and this past season they went 7-10. Now, the 2 years that the Cowboys had a losing record, Dak Prescott got hurt. Now, this year, I think had Dak Prescott not gotten hurt, I mean, I think the results kind of maybe stay the same. Because the Cowboys did play a little bit better down the stretch here. The first year, though, that was when Dak had that horrific ankle injury against the Giants. And they had to start Garrett Gilbert and Andy Dalton, and I'm trying to think of who else. Am I missing anybody? No, there was another quarterback they had to start, or maybe that was it. I might be missing one. Oh, Ben DiNucci. That's right. They had to start him on that Sunday night against the Eagles. I remember that. So yeah, had Dak not gotten hurt that year, I think maybe the record might have been flipped. But, well, also, actually, the Cowboys' defense was not good that year. Wasn't good this year either, but it did improve towards the end of the year when they started getting guys back. But, yeah, I mean, for Cowboy fans, they've kind of been stuck in kind of the same cycle as the Steelers to an extent, where they're a team that makes the playoffs. And, yeah, I mean, they might win a playoff game, but then they get knocked down in the second round. Now, Pete Carroll is out there. I keep saying Pete Carroll. So, if the Cowboys wanted to bring him in, maybe you say goodbye to Mike McCarthy, you bring Pete Carroll in. But the thing is, though, is Pete Carroll going to be a good fit if they brought him in? Again, Pete Carroll would change the culture immediately, but I think because of the power that Jerry Jones possesses, I don't know how that relationship would work. So right now I'd probably lean towards them bringing back McCarthy, because they could say, look, you had injuries. You made the playoffs 3 straight years. Let's run it back. I could see that happening. Like, I don't see them going out and getting Brian Flores or right now Mike Vrabel. We just talked about him. I think he's going to the Patriots. And I don't think they're going to bring in a first-time head coach. Now, I thought because he used to be with the team, what if they went out and they brought in Kellen Moore to be the head coach? Because he used to be on the staff. And he used to play quarterback for them. I think 2015, I remember he played a game. But I think this is probably what's going to end up happening is McCarthy's going to come back. Now, is it going to be, are Cowboy fans going to be happy with that? Like I said, I think there's going to be some that want him back, and I think, I would guess the majority of fans probably don't want him back because that means that they're going to keep going through the same thing where they are a good regular season team. But you get to the playoffs, you play against some of these better teams, and you end up getting knocked out. That's what happens. Now, this year was different. You didn't make the playoffs. I still thought the Cowboys would make the playoffs. But once Dak Prescott went down, that was pretty much it. They played a little bit better. I think because the Cowboys played better, well, yeah, I guess, yeah, you could say that. I guess they played better with Cooper Rush at quarterback after Dak got hurt. You know, they beat the Commanders on the road. They beat the Buccaneers at home. You know, those are teams that are going to the playoffs. I think that showed, like, you know, the players still play for McCarthy, and because of that, maybe that earned him another contract with the Cowboys. That's just my opinion. But only time will tell. I mean, again, we went over some of the other options. I know before Belichick signed the deal with North Carolina, there was maybe a possibility he could go to the Cowboys. I know there were some reports out there. But I guess at this point, you kind of just say, all right, we'll go with McCarthy. I know there were other reports out there that maybe they should go and draft Shedeur Sanders so then Deion comes. No, that's not going to happen. Definitely not going to happen. So yeah, I guess Mike McCarthy might be the best option for them. Even though I tend to agree with what I said that you bring back McCarthy, it's going to be more of the same. It's going to be more of the same. But Jerry Jones, I think, likes McCarthy a lot. And we saw what happened during the Jason Garrett era, where he was the head coach forever. Throughout the whole, pretty much the whole 2010s. And it took a while before Jerry Jones finally said, all right, we got to make a change. Basically, my whole life, watching football, Jason Garrett was the head coach of the Cowboys. And the Cowboys never really won anything. You know, Tony Romo finally won a playoff game when he was the head coach, and then Dak Prescott took over. Dak Prescott only has 2 playoff wins. Right? It's only 2. Yeah, only 2 playoff wins. That's it. Or 3. Does he have 3? No, he only has 2 because he won. No. Yeah, he only has 2. I was second guessing myself. Because they won against Pete Carroll's Seahawks, and then a couple years ago they beat Tom Brady in his final game. And the Bucs really weren't that great that year. And in 2018, that Seahawks team, some people didn't expect them to make the playoffs because there were a lot of changes on defense, but they made it because, they're a well-coached team. And that was back when Russell Wilson was a top 10 quarterback. And they played the Cowboys in Dallas, and they lost the game. So, yeah, like I said, it took a while for Jerry Jones to finally let go of Jason Garrett. So, we could be maybe heading down that same path again. We'll see. But let me know what you guys think. Should the Cowboys bring back Mike McCarthy? I guess I would lean towards yes, just because now there's a ton of options out there, but I don't know if there's necessarily a fit. So, and look, he had 3 12-5 seasons. Dak Prescott got hurt. I think if this team, and also how they finished out the season, I think if they would have won 4 games this year, like it was looking like it was going towards at one point, then I would probably lean towards not bringing him back. But because of how the Cowboys played down the stretch, the defense played better, and they won some games that they probably shouldn't have won, but they did. But they won. I think maybe you give him another shot. Cowboy fans might not like it, but that's just how I feel. So, yeah, let me know what you guys think, though, should they bring back McCarthy. But before we go to break, I just want to remind you guys once again to tip or donate and get your comments recognized. Make sure to hit that super chat button in the chat if you want to see me acknowledge any thought or comment you may have throughout the live broadcast. Makes the show more lively and more entertaining. Between myself, the host, and you guys, the viewers, we appreciate you guys' viewership each and every day, so any contribution you can make to the show means the world to us as we put out content for you guys each and every day. And also, the other way to help out the show is by going to the link at the bottom of the show segment on the ticker, GSMCpodcast.net. That is GSMCpodcast.net. So when we come back from our next break, we will talk about the Lions and David Montgomery. He will be returning for the divisional round, whoever the Lions may play. We don't know who they're going to be playing just yet. We'll find out after this weekend. So we'll talk about the impact of that when we return from our next break. So with that being said, stick around, and we'll be right back here on the GSMC Football Podcast.
Looking for your daily fix of sports talk without having to pay for it? GSMC Sports Network is available on YouTube. Just search GSMC Sports Network. Get your fix of daily sports talk shows on YouTube, absolutely free. NFL, college football, NBA, MLB, MMA, UFC, fantasy football, and so much more. GSMC Sports Network has shows running all day long, with new sports shows starting every 2 hours. Just like on your favorite cable sports channel, except GSMC Sports Network is absolutely free. Just search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube to catch one of your new favorite shows, like the GSMC College Football Podcast, Chip Shot Football Podcast, Hoops and Heels Women's Sports Podcast, GSMC Basketball Podcast, and so many more. Check it out for yourself. GSMC Sports Network, now available on YouTube absolutely free. Search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube right now.
All right, and we are back here on the GSMC Football Podcast, and for the third part of the show, we're going to now talk about the news that David Montgomery, running back for the Lions, will make his return in the divisional round, whoever the Lions are going to play. And if you remember when he got hurt, initially, it looked like season-ending surgery, he's done, huge blow for the Lions. But then reports were coming out that he wasn't going to undergo surgery, and he's going to come back. He's going to try to come back, and he is going to make his return next weekend. Again, we don't know who the Lions are going to play yet, but this is huge news for them. This is huge news for them. I mean, Jahmyr Gibbs has done a fabulous job, taking on basically the entire workload out of the backfield. I mean, you saw the game he had the other night against the Vikings. He had 4 touchdowns. But getting Montgomery back is huge because, it helps out Gibbs, and it just helps out the overall offense. And we get to see Sonic and Knuckles take on the NFL playoffs together after the success of Sonic 3. I have not seen any of the Sonic movies, so I might have to at some point. But, yeah, this is huge. This is a huge boost for their offense. I mean, their offense still is clicked. even with Montgomery being out, with all the injuries that the Lions have dealt with, it really hasn't mattered. They just score points. They continue to do that. And not only that, getting him back, but they got Alex Anzalone back on defense, and he's a big piece on that side of the ball. So the Lions are starting to slowly but surely get guys back. And, you also saw Aiden Hutchinson on the sidelines on Sunday. And, he said if the Lions make it to the Super Bowl, he might play. So that would be huge getting him back. I mean, obviously, him coming back and playing in that game, I don't think he's going to get... I mean, this is way down the line, but... Well, not way down the line, but somewhat down the line. Super Bowl is about a month away. But he would not be taking, I think, that many snaps. Because he would just be coming back. But we'll see. The Lions got to get there first. And, looking at David Montgomery and the season that he's had, 775 rushing yards on the year. He has 12 rushing touchdowns and on 185 carries. And him and Gibbs have been awesome together. And you go back to last year, the year before that, they had Jamal Williams and DeAndre Swift. They completely changed their backfield to Montgomery and Gibbs, and that's been better. And Jamal Williams had, I think, the most rushing touchdowns in the league in 2022. And DeAndre Swift is a pretty good back as well. But the Lions were like, all right, we're gonna go in a different direction, completely different running back room. We got Montgomery, and we got Gibbs, and they've been better. And that is going to be a huge key for the Lions in the playoffs, is this running game. And they could beat you so many different ways with the running game. And both these running backs can catch passes out of the backfield, too, which makes them versatile. But the passing game of the Lions, too, that opens it up, with the play action and, Jared Goff, who's had a good year. I mean, that offense will be whole, essentially, if you get Montgomery back. Because you got Khalif Raymond back as well. And, of course, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Jameson Williams, and Sam Laporta. And Jameson Williams, I think he finished with over 1,000 yards this year. So, listen, I said this before. Going into the year, that was a guy that I was saying he could step up and be that number 2 option. And also, they've gotten contributions from other players, too. I mean, Tim Patrick, had some big games for them as well. So, yeah, this is huge news. And like I was saying, leading up to the Vikings game and even, this week, the Lions needed the bye week. Because I did say, I didn't realize, just because I forgot, that they had such an early bye week. Week 5 it was. And on top of that, you got so many players that are hurt right now. You need that bye week to rest up and maybe get, more of those players back. Now, some of them are not coming back. But you got Anzalone back. You got Khalif Raymond back. Montgomery's going to be making his return. So the Lions are slowly but surely becoming whole again. And I was surprised by how well their defense played on Sunday. Now, I think part of it had to do with, Sam Darnold was a little erratic with some of his throws. But, credit to the Lions defense, though. Because, there were a lot of people going into that game saying, you know what, the Vikings are the healthier team. They might win this. And the Lions were like, no, this is our year. We're not losing in our house. And, the defense played well. Jahmyr Gibbs had a monster game. Now, how are they going to look when we get to the divisional round? Who is their opponent going to be? It's either going to be, you could see the Packers coming in if they upset the Eagles. We could maybe see, maybe it's the Commanders if they win. Could be the Rams or the Vikings. I would love for it to be the Rams again, just because every time those teams match up against each other, the game is usually good. Week 1, they beat the Rams in overtime. And then, of course, you had not the divisional round. That was against the Buccaneers. But the wild card game last year, that was also good. So if we saw Rams-Lions again, I don't think anybody's complaining about that. Unless you're one of those people that's like, oh, we've seen this already. But I'd be okay seeing Rams-Lions again. And Matthew Stafford, again, would be going back to Detroit to face them for the third time in the last 2 years, if that does happen. So, yeah, we'll see. But, as we were winding down the regular season, I was getting a little nervous with all these players getting hurt for the Lions because I have the Lions in the Super Bowl. And the two teams that I have playing in New Orleans, they both have first-round byes. That's them, and that's the Kansas City Chiefs. And now that the Lions are starting to get whole again, I feel confident that they can get it done and get there. But there are some teams that I could definitely see knocking them off. And I've talked about that as we go into the playoffs here. I think the NFC playoffs are going to be fantastic. Because I do believe that any of these teams in the NFC can make a run. You can make the case. Now, maybe there's some teams that you'd probably favor more in making a run more than others. But I do think for each individual team in the NFC, you can make a case. And that's why I am, really excited for this weekend. We got some good games this weekend. Like, even when you look at the 2 seeds facing off against the 7 seeds, like, I still think those games are going to be competitive. Now, we'll get into them on Friday, of course. Well, actually, we'll talk about the 7-seeded Broncos and the 6-seeded Commanders in a little bit. But yeah, I just I don't really think there's not one matchup I look at this weekend and I'm just like, yeah, this is a horrible game. I know some people might look at Chargers Texans maybe, but I think all the games this weekend are going to be good. But we'll see. There's probably going to be a blowout in there. Oh, yeah, you also could say, well, the Steelers and the Ravens. Yeah, but you never know. You never know. So, but the Lions, they got to wait another week before they find out who they're going to play. So they can rest up. They deserve it. Their fans deserve it, too. Well, not that their fans got to rest up. Well, listen. They're the 12th man. So they got to, make sure that they're ready to go when the Lions take the field next week. Got to make sure they have their defenses back because they're going to need it. But, yeah, it's good, though, that they're starting to get some of their players back. And, we'll see if maybe some other players besides Montgomery make their return. And also, we'll see what happens with this coaching staff, too, because, you got Ben Johnson and Aaron Glenn. They're both head coaching candidates. And, we'll see if they end up leaving this coaching staff. So the Lions, if there's a chance that these guys leave, hopefully they, can win the whole thing. Because then at least if you lose them, you're like, hey, we won the Super Bowl. So I'm curious to see where Ben Johnson ends up. Because I know the Bears are a spot for him. I know he's been linked to that. Maybe Jacksonville. Talked about them before. I don't know. We'll have to wait and see. But let me know what you guys think though, about Montgomery making his return. How do you see that impacting the Lions? I mean, it's not that hard. I mean, he is a very good running back for them. And, again, it just makes their offense more dynamic. And it's pretty much whole, like I said. You get him back, that helps out Gibbs. Because, again, there's a lot of times you'll have Montgomery take a drive and then Gibbs comes in for another drive. They alternate. And that's why, if you had, my one friend had both of them in fantasy, it's fine. And you start both of them because they both could score touchdowns in the same game. And they both, take turns being the lead back on drives. So, yeah, no, it's good for the Lions. They're starting to get a little bit healthier. I know that there's some other players that are hurt. The defense is still banged up, and that definitely is concerning going into the playoffs. But again, you saw how they played on Sunday, and that was against the Vikings offense that was clicking. So, we'll see how it goes. But like I said, let me know what you guys think about Montgomery's return. We're going to take our next break. When we come back, we will talk about the Broncos and the Commanders making the playoffs. And can they make a run? Can these teams make a run in the playoffs? We'll talk about that when we return from our next break. So with that being said, stick around. And we'll be right back here on the GSMC Football Podcast.
For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC to access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found.
And we are back here on the GSMC Football Podcast. And for the fourth part of the show, we will talk about the Broncos and the Commanders making the playoffs behind rookie quarterbacks. And, could these teams possibly make a run in the playoffs? Now, before we get into that, it's just, I want to bring up the Giants for a second. So, in terms of winning percentage, they have the toughest schedule going into the 2025 season. The teams that they will be going up against combined this year had a winning percentage of .574. You would think because of the way their season went that they would maybe have, a slightly easier schedule. No. They will be playing the AFC West next year. They will be playing, I believe, the NFC North next year. They also got the 49ers on the schedule as well. Yeah, it's not going to be fun. Not going to be fun. And the 49ers, speaking of them, they have the easiest schedule next year in terms of winning percentage, .415. So I expect a bounce back year from the Niners next year. But I just wanted to bring that up. Sorry. Let's get into teams that are actually in the playoffs, though. The Broncos and the Commanders. These were two teams that I really just... I did not expect them to make the playoffs. I didn't. I had the Broncos winning, I think... I had the Commanders winning, I think, 4, which is the same as last year. But the Commanders and the Broncos, they went above and beyond. But a lot of that had to do with the quarterback play. Both quarterbacks, Bo Nix and Jayden Daniels, they are the top candidates for Offensive Rookie of the Year. You could also throw Brock Bowers in there as well, but it's probably going to be one of these two quarterbacks. It's probably going to be... I'd probably lean towards Jayden Daniels, But it's close. But Bo Nix has had a good year. I mean, look, part of it is I just didn't know what to expect out of the rookie quarterbacks. I mean, the first games for them did not go well. The Broncos, they lost to the Seahawks in Seattle. And the Commanders, they got blown out by the Bucs. And, I mean, again, it's one game. But, their seasons didn't get off to the best starts. But Bo Nix, so he finished with 29 touchdowns to 12 picks, 3,700 yards passing. And then for Jayden Daniels on the season, he finished with 25 touchdowns to 9 picks, and he also had 6 rushing touchdowns. Almost 900 yards rushing on the season. It's going to go to him. But I think these are two teams that are playing with a lot of confidence right now, going into their matchups. Now, I think the Broncos have the tougher matchup of the two, because the Commanders have played the Buccaneers already this year, and they are a different team than they were the first time. Jayden Daniels has now gone through a whole season. And I did bring up the fact that I have some concerns about the Bucs defense going into the playoffs. So I think the Commanders have a chance to upset the Buccaneers. Now, do I think the Broncos have no chance in their game against the Bills? No, they have a chance. But of the two games, the Broncos have the tougher matchup. They're going up against the Bills. They're going up, that crowd is going to, of course, be electric. And, Josh Allen is an MVP candidate, so might be the MVP. So, the odds are kind of stacked up against the Broncos going into this game. I mean, nothing surprises me at this point, but I would be surprised to an extent if the Broncos are able to pull it off and beat the Bills. Commanders, not so much if they beat the Bucs. But, we'll see. But also, you got to credit the coaching staffs and what they were able to do with these two quarterbacks this year. Because, again, I wasn't a fan of the Dan Quinn hire for the Commanders, and then, they brought in Cliff Kingsbury, who, can coach offense. I guess he's better as a coordinator than he is as a head coach. I mean, maybe he gets another shot, but right now, probably not. At this moment. And then Sean Payton. Last year with Russell Wilson, I mean, when the Broncos gave up 70 points to the Dolphins, I mean, I came on here, I remember, and I was just, I kept criticizing Sean Payton and, what's going on here? But then the Broncos turned the season around. They had a better second half. They just missed out on the playoffs, but still, they had a better second half. And then look at how the team has played this year. The defense has played well, and their quarterback has played well, and that is a huge credit to Sean Payton. Sean Payton's a really good coach. I guess, the Dolphins game was just an aberration. It was a fluke. I mean, probably never going to see a team score 70 points again. But I still can't believe that happened. We've come a long way since then. And yeah, you got to give credit to all the credit in the world to Sean Payton and to Dan Quinn and his staff, because they've turned these teams around. Because the team that I root for, they've kind of been going through, and again, I bring them into the discussion, but they've been going through the same thing over and over and over again. Commanders, it took 1 year, and look at them. Last year they finished with 4 wins. This year they got 12 wins, and yeah, they're on the come up. They're on the come up. And, some of the moves they made in the offseason, they signed a lot of veteran guys. Bobby Wagner, Zach Ertz, Austin Eckler. And, we kind of dismissed those moves because we're like, well, these guys are kind of past their prime. I mean, sure, maybe that, having veteran leadership helps, but again, I didn't expect the Commanders to win 12 games. But you also had Terry McLaurin. He had a huge year because now he has his quarterback. They do have a nice duo with Eckler and, of course, Brian Robinson Jr. The defense has played better. And actually, we're going to get to see, I didn't even think about this, but we're going to see Marshawn Lattimore match up against Mike Evans in this game. And they have had a huge history, or a long history, when he was with the Saints. So that's a matchup to pay attention to. But, yeah, no, these were two teams that I really just, I took, look at their schedules and was like, yeah, probably not going to be that good. But also, like I said, I didn't know how the rookie quarterbacks were going to be. And it took some time, but they settled in. They both got better as the year went along. I mean, I think it took a little bit more time for Bo Nix. But, no, they both look really good. And, I mean, again, I've said it so many times. This draft class looks really good. And if J.J. McCarthy turns out to be good too, that's just another quarterback to add to it. Wherever he ends up, if he's still with the Vikings or if somebody trades for him. But I do think when you look at these two teams, they do pose a threat. I could definitely see, I don't know if both of them are going to move on this weekend, but I could definitely see at least one of these teams moving on to the next round. I mean, I'm just excited for the playoffs in general. Playoffs, for the most part, are always good. So, but, yeah, I give these teams and their coaching staffs and their quarterbacks a ton of credit because I didn't see it coming. I had both of these teams finishing in last in their division. I mean, I know the Broncos are playing against the Chiefs' backups, but they shut them out. They shut him out. And Bo Nix torched them. Now, I think if the Broncos move on and they go up against the Chiefs, because the Broncos would definitely play against the Chiefs if they win, they would give the Chiefs problems in that game. Because, you go back to the game they lost, I forget what week it was, but the Broncos were going to win that game. But then the Chiefs blocked the field goal. Had the Chiefs not have done that, Broncos would have swept the season series. There's a part of me that thought, had the Chiefs played their starters the whole game, part of me thought that maybe they probably still win. But we'll never know. We'll see what happens if they do match up against each other, but that would mean that the Broncos would have upset the Bills. But I do give them a chance against the Bills, but again, I wouldn't lean towards picking them. That's my thoughts. But the Commanders, I could see, just because they played the Bucs already, and they're a different team than they were when we saw them way back in Week 1, that matchup. Also, the Buccaneers have dealt with injuries. There's no Chris Godwin in that game, or in this game. Although Jalen McMillan has stepped up. And, of course, the running game with Bucky Irving as well. We'll see how it goes. But, credit to these teams, like I said, for making the playoffs. And let's see what they do. They both play on Sunday. Broncos-Bills gets us started off that day. And then the night game is Commanders-Buccaneers. So we'll see if none of them move on, if one of them moves on, if both of them move on. We'll find out. We're getting close. But, yeah, let me know what you guys think, though, about these two teams. Do you think that they pose a threat in the playoffs? Let me know in the comments. So when we come back from our final break of the show, I will do my power rankings. I will rank my top 5 teams going into the playoffs. I know, again, we haven't done that in a while just because of the layoff that we had with the holidays and everything. So it has been a minute, but don't worry. We are going to go through it and discuss what my top 5 teams are going into the playoffs. So, for one final time today, make sure to stick around, and we'll be right back here on the GSMC Football Podcast. And we are back here on the GSMC Football Podcast, and for the final part of the show, we'll now get into ranking my top 5 teams going into the playoffs, and that will take us right to the end of the show. So let's get into that. So at my number 5 spot here, we have the Baltimore Ravens. Now, some people might say that might be too low for them. I mean, there's a lot of good teams. And I think these 5 teams can win the whole thing. They could. That's how good, that's how many good teams we have in the playoffs right now. But, yeah, the Ravens, look, it at times this year it didn't look pretty. Early on in the season when they lost to the Raiders, and when they lost that 18-16 game to the Steelers winning on 6 field goals. But they've turned it up, and they finished the regular season strong. They blew out the Steelers, they blew out the Texans, and they blew out the Browns. So they're coming into this playoffs on a roll. Now, they'll be taking on the Steelers again for the 3rd time this year, so we'll see how that goes. But they got an MVP candidate in Lamar Jackson. He has had an incredible year, and it's going to be very close. Like, I thought Josh Allen kind of locked up the MVP, after, the game against the Rams, and then you had the game against the Lions as well. But it's so close because Lamar Jackson hasn't beaten some categories. So, I don't know. It's going to be very close. You could definitely make a strong case for either. I would still lean towards Josh Allen right now, but, I mean, if Lamar won it again, I'm not going to complain because he's had a great year. But also, the man that you see in the picture here, Derrick Henry, what a season he had going from the Titans to the Ravens. I mean, he fits right in. This was such a perfect spot for him, and this has added more years to his career, just being with the Ravens now. Such a good spot for him. Now, what concerns me going into the playoffs, Zay Flowers got hurt in the game against the Browns. So I don't think he's playing this weekend. Yeah, he's a long shot to play in the game against the Steelers this weekend. However, John Harbaugh said on Monday it's not a season-ending injury, so that's good. But, that's a big piece to your offense that you're losing. Now, I think the Ravens will be okay. But, Zay Flowers had a good year. He's been good these first couple of years. And, he's kind of that number one wide receiver for your offense. So, but Rashad Bateman's had a nice year. You still got Mark Andrews and Isaiah Likely. So, and, of course, you got Lamar Jackson and Derrick Henry. So, they should be okay. But also the defense, too. I think the defense has played better as we've gone along this season. There's still some concerns there. Mainly the pass defense. I mean, the run defense is good. It's really been against the pass where the Ravens have struggled. But they've made some tweaks that maybe have helped. So, now they'll be going up against a very familiar opponent in the Steelers. But how is this defense going to look if we see them go up against the Bills? Or if they go up against the Chiefs? Now, we did see the Ravens smack the Bills around earlier this season, but that was a home game for them. If they do take on the Bills again, it's going to be on the road. So how is that going to go? Well, let's see what happens this weekend, if we do indeed get that matchup. But, this team is very dangerous going into the postseason. But, every team has a weakness. But yeah, hopefully they can get Zay Flowers back if they do move on this weekend. And let's see what they do when they take on the Steelers. But yeah, this is my number 5 team. Then at number 4, right above them, I got the Buffalo Bills. So I know I just brought up, the Ravens smacked them around. That was earlier in the season. Let's see what happens if these two teams do match up once again. But Josh Allen has been Superman this year. He has put together arguably his best season to date. And this is coming off of an offseason where, there were some question marks because they traded Stephon Diggs. And, you got some young receivers like Keon Coleman. You bring in Curtis Samuel. They traded for Amari Cooper midseason, which was a good move. But, yeah, there was definitely some question marks coming in, but Josh Allen has played his best football, like I said, arguably. And could this be the year that the Bills finally break through? We're going to find out. Also, you got James Cook running the football, which helps. One of the underrated running backs. I don't think he gets enough respect. The defense has been good enough as well. This is another team. Like I said, all these teams, they can win the whole thing. They can. And like I said, could this be the years the Bills finally break through? It's possible. I give them a good chance to. And a lot of that has to do with how Josh Allen is playing right now. So I got them at number 4. At number 3, I have the Philadelphia Eagles. Now, this might be too low for them in some people's eyes, but I got to put them at 3. We still got to wait and see what happens with Jalen Hurts. He still has not cleared concussion protocol, but I think he's still going to play. He's going to play on Sunday. I'm not concerned about that. Now, if we get to Friday and we still have no updates, or the updates are just not good, well, then I'll change my tune. But he's going to play. And this Eagles team, I said before the year started, this is one of the few things that I got right, is that the Eagles were going to win this division, the NFC East. They made changes to the coaching staff. They had a nice draft by, improving the secondary, drafting a couple of defensive backs. This team, and of course they got Saquon Barkley, which was a home run. And look at what happened. This team is the number 2 seed in the NFC. And I think this is the team that has the best chance to upset the Lions, in my opinion. And I've said that before. I think they have the team to do it. Now, we'll see if we get that matchup in a couple weeks. But this team, from top to bottom, is one of the best. And, at times this year, similar to the Ravens, early on in the season, it wasn't looking good because, they were barely getting by in some of these games. But then they kind of, found their identity with Saquon Barkley. And, Barkley just had a out-of-this-world year. And if it wasn't for him, Derrick Henry would have been, the top running back this year. But Saquon has been a difference maker, and they're going to lean on him heavy in these playoffs. And, combined with, arguably the best wide receiver duo in the league. That's a little bit too strong, but they're up there. A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith, and you get Jalen Hurts back with the top offensive line. And the defense has played well this year. Yeah, this is one of the best teams, and they're going to be a problem. And right now, I lean towards taking them on Sunday against the Packers. But again, we got to find out what happens with Jalen Hurts. So I got them at 3. I actually have the Lions at 2. Now, they've been arguably the best team all year. Still a little banged up on defense. We did talk about the encouraging news of them getting David Montgomery back. So hopefully they get him back. Close to... he's not going to be 100%, but maybe he'll be, like 70 to 80%. If that's even reasonable to say. But they got some guys back. They're the number 1 seed in the NFC, and they deserve it. And like I said, I think the Eagles have the best chance to knock them off, but you know what? They only have 2 losses on the season. And one of them was very early on in the year against the Bucs. Their only other losses against the Bills. So it's going to be tough to beat them, and especially in their stadium. But Jared Goff played really well this year. Of course, Montgomery was healthy to go along with Gibbs. That rushing attack is one of the best. They have one of the best receivers in the NFL in Amon-Ra St. Brown. And Dan Campbell has his team playing really well. So I got them at number 2. And at number 1, I got a team that is starting to round into form, and that's the Kansas City Chiefs. Since Hollywood Brown has come back, and I honestly forgot about him because he got hurt in the preseason. We didn't really hear about him. Came back against the Texans. And I feel like the offense has looked different since he's come back. Xavier Worthy has looked better in recent weeks. He's been getting more involved. He had a nice rookie season. Turned into a nice rookie season. They got Isaiah Pacheco back. Kareem Hunt did a nice job filling in for him. Travis Kelce scored a touchdown on Christmas against the Steelers. It would not surprise me if Kelce has a big postseason. It seems like that happens every year. And then you got the defense. This team, when it's playoff time, they know what's at stake. And I just feel like we're heading towards another one of those seasons where, especially now with the Chiefs having home field advantage, I just think we might be heading towards a three-peat. Patrick Mahomes did not play like an MVP this year by any means, but as long as he plays like an MVP in the postseason, nobody's going to care. And of course you got one of the best head coaches in the league in Andy Reid, and apologize for my dog barking. Was hoping we'd make it towards the end without that happening. She was right outside my door. So, of course, that has to happen. I guess my brother might have come home or something. But anyways, yeah, the Chiefs, they looked like they were rounding into form the last couple of weeks. Obviously, you could throw the 38-0 loss to Denver out the window because they're playing their backups. But, yeah, The road to the Super Bowl in the AFC runs through Kansas City once again, and I think we might be seeing them in it once again, but who knows? So to run through my top 5 once again, Ravens at 5, Bills at 4, Eagles at 3, Lions at 2, and the Chiefs at 1. Let me know what you guys think about these rankings going into the playoffs. What would your rankings be? Again, these 5 teams I could see winning the whole thing. And I did, the Vikings just missed out. I mean, that's a team that I could see making a run. There are a lot of good teams that are in it this year. I don't think, I know the Steelers are coming in on a 4-game losing streak, but when I look at the playoffs collectively, from top to bottom, there's not one team I look at and I say this team does not deserve to be in the playoffs. I know there's some teams coming in with, losing streaks, but I like, the teams that are in it, I think all deserve to be in it. But, yeah, let me know what you guys think, though, about my rankings. And that brings us to the end of the show today. I appreciate you guys tuning in. Make sure to check out all the other shows as well on the network. Make sure to leave a like, comment, and subscribe to the video. And until next time, I'm Kenneth Gruenfelder signing off from the GSMC Football Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. Have a good day, and I will talk to you guys tomorrow. Take care.
Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day. Yeah, I'm tired of